The clinking of dishes and the dull roar of industrial sinks echoed through the dim backroom of a busy downtown restaurant. Steam clouded the air, making it feel more like a prison cell than a kitchen. In that suffocating heat, a thin, weary man bent over a mountain of plates, his hands raw and cracked from endless hours of scrubbing. His movements were mechanical, not because he wanted to be there, but because he had no other choice. And yet, no one noticed him. Customers laughed in the dining hall, servers rushed around balancing trays, and chefs shouted orders, but here he was, silent, unseen, and forgotten. This man wasn't just working a shift, he was surviving on borrowed time, working back-to-back days, and the most painful truth of all, he wasn't even getting paid for the extra hours. But someone was watching, someone who wasn't supposed to be there at all. The man scrubbing dishes had no idea that the stranger mopping the floor nearby wasn't a cleaner, wasn't a temp, but the CEO of the very company that owned this chain of restaurants. And what this undercover CEO would uncover about the dishwasher's story would shake him to his core, forcing him to confront not only the failures of his company but the hidden battles of everyday people that often go unseen. Before I take you deeper into this powerful journey, I want to pause for just a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that one act of compassion can change a life, then please take a second to like this video, subscribe to Royal Stories, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that humanity is still alive in this world. Now, let us step back into that kitchen, into the silence that spoke louder than words, and follow the story of a dishwasher whose pain was hidden behind soap and steam. The CEO, Daniel Hartman, had built his empire on hard work and discipline, but over the years, success had distanced him from the lives of ordinary employees. He had boardrooms and private jets, spreadsheets and quarterly goals, but what he had lost was perspective. That's why he went undercover, to see his company through the eyes of those who worked at the very bottom. Disguised as a janitor, dressed in cheap clothes, with calloused hands rubbed with dirt to look more convincing, he blended in, listening, observing, and waiting. It was on his third night that he noticed the dishwasher, a frail man in his mid-40s, with sunken cheeks and a body that seemed too weak for the grueling labor he carried. His eyes were tired, but not just from work, they carried the weight of someone who hadn't rested in years. Daniel noticed how the man arrived long before others and stayed long after everyone else left. At first, Daniel thought it was simply a worker desperate to earn overtime. But then he overheard something that froze him in place. The man wasn't getting paid for those extra hours. He was told he had to prove himself if he wanted a permanent position. Daniel's heart sank. He had strict company policies that protected workers from this kind of exploitation, yet here it was, happening right under his nose. The managers barked orders, piling on more dishes, mocking the man's silence, and taking advantage of his desperation. What disturbed Daniel most wasn't just the abuse, but the man's complete lack of resistance. He never argued, never spoke back, never even sighed in frustration. It was as though he had accepted that this was his fate. Curiosity gnawed at Daniel. Who was this man? Why would anyone endure such cruelty without protest? Over the next week, Daniel pieced together fragments of his life. The dishwasher's name was Miguel. He had once been a carpenter, skilled with his hands, but tragedy had stripped everything away. His wife had died suddenly from illness, leaving him alone with 2 young children. To make matters worse, a house fire had consumed what little savings and shelter they had left. Homeless and burdened, Miguel worked any job he could find, often sleeping in shelters, sometimes even on the floor of the kitchen after closing, just so he could send what little money he made to the people who mattered most, his kids, who were staying with relatives in another town. The realization broke Daniel in ways he hadn't expected. Here was a man, crushed by life's merciless weight, yet still pushing forward without complaint, sacrificing his own dignity so his children might have a better chance. Daniel had sat in countless board meetings about profit margins and efficiency, but never once had those numbers conveyed the kind of human suffering standing right in front of him. One night, long after the restaurant closed, Daniel watched Miguel collapse onto a chair, his body trembling with exhaustion. He held a small, worn-out photograph of his children, pressing it against his chest like a prayer. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes as he realized the depth of this man's quiet strength. That was the moment Daniel decided he couldn't stay silent anymore. But before revealing who he was, Daniel dug deeper. He interviewed other staff members quietly, heard the whispers about managers cutting corners, stealing tips, and exploiting vulnerable workers. It wasn't just Miguel who was suffering, the whole system in that location was broken. And it was his responsibility to fix it. When the truth finally came out, it came like a storm. Daniel called a meeting with the staff and revealed his true identity. The room went silent, shock painting every face. He turned to Miguel and, with a voice heavy with emotion, thanked him, not for the work he had done, but for the lesson he had unknowingly given. He promised Miguel not only a permanent position but a fair wage, full benefits, and immediate back pay for the hours stolen from him. But Daniel didn't stop there. He arranged housing support for Miguel and personally ensured that his children could move back in with him. The managers who had exploited him were swiftly removed, their actions investigated, and new leadership was installed with strict accountability. But more than policies or punishments, Daniel carried something deeper from that experience, a renewed understanding that the heart of any company lies not in its profits, but in its people. Miguel's story spread across the company, becoming a symbol of resilience and hope. And for Daniel, it was a reminder that success without compassion is hollow. He began dedicating resources to create programs for struggling employees, emergency funds, mental health support, and career growth opportunities. He knew he couldn't erase Miguel's past suffering, but he could ensure no one else would have to endure the same. And as for Miguel, he didn't just survive anymore. He lived. He moved into a modest apartment with his children, cooked them warm meals, and watched them laugh again. For the first time in years, he slept without fear. And every morning when he returned to work, he walked through those restaurant doors with his head held high, no longer invisible, no longer forgotten. If this story has touched your heart, I ask you sincerely, please like this video, subscribe to Royal Stories, and share it so more people can be reminded that even in a world that often feels cold, there are moments of light and humanity worth holding onto. And before we close, I leave you with a special request. Comment below with one word that describes what kindness means to you. Your voice may inspire someone else who needs hope today.